Right. Thoughts like that and every conversation explores the other thinking beyond the obvious. And today I have my special guest. She's a Midwest born, Zurich based, second time founder of a 20 plus year coaching firm. Live in 6 countries, speak four languages, and helping global executives and teams to lead with courage. None other than Miss Margo McClimans.
That's right.
Welcome,
Thank you. Thank you so much for
welcome,
the invitation. It's great to be here.
welcome, Miss Margo and Abstract Essay. And can you please introduce more about yourself that I miss?
Yeah, absolutely. As you mentioned, Midwest born, that's Columbus, Ohio, is where I hail from, although I lived in many parts of the US, lived in Asia, lived in various countries in Europe, and have now based here in Zurich with my family of six.
Yes, and thank you so much for sharing your knowledge and wisdom to the world, Miss Margo. Thank you. And today let's talk about what 2000 plus coaching conversations taught you about real leadership growth. You
Yes.
now work with the over 2,500 clients from 50 plus countries across 3 continents, coaching thousands of managers from over 60 nations. When you had a very first coaching conversation back in 2005, before you even knew that coaching was, could you have imagined that 2 decades later you'd have accumulated these many stories, this much wisdom, this many human beings trusting you with their growth?
Yeah, I don't think I could have imagined that. Actually, when I started, I also had my first business running, which was a marble and granite import and export business. I was a broker, and actually, I had just hatched that stone business, and I was making it fly when I was kind of discovered as a coach by the director of my MBA program, which I had completed 2 years or 3 years previous, and he saw that in me. Dr. Al Ringleb, he was really, I feel very lucky that he could see that coaching was something that would be something that I could add a lot of value to, that I could get a lot of value from. And at the time, I was juggling both, and I had fully intended to keep that stone business alive, and I was working with Dr. Al and these MBA students, coaching, and I saw the power of it. I saw how much energy they were getting, how much energy I was getting, and it just blossomed as a business, almost without effort, because it's like when you really find your niche, when you really find the thing that works for you. I'm of the belief that if it happens easily, it's meant to be somehow. And so I kept both businesses going in parallel for about 5 years. Actually, I was coaching and running the stone business, and in 2010 I finally realized, okay, time to close the chapter on the stone business and dedicate myself full time to the coaching business. And that's when it really took off, and I moved to Zurich, and I expanded my client base and my team of coaches. But I never could have imagined back then. That's true.
Interesting, Ms. Margot. You did not set out to be a coach, as you're telling while ago. You were running a stone import export business, and somehow, and someone saw something in you that hadn't yet seen in yourself. Looking back, what was the person seeing that you could not yet see, and how has that moment shaped you as a potential in your own clients?
Yeah, I think that what that person saw in me was my ability to connect with human beings and the value of that. For me, that's second nature. I just love people. I love to explore. I'm a curious person. I want to understand more about what makes them tick, about what their goals and motivations are, what stops them, what drives them. And for me, that just feels like normal. But actually, that's not something that everyone has. I think a lot of people can be, very task focused and have great success, great results focusing on the task. And then a lot of people are more focused on the people side, but having a good balance of those two is what really makes great leaders stand out. So he saw that ability to connect with humans in me. And what my client advisory board told me once about what makes me and our style unique and different maybe from other coaching organizations is, and I'll never forget my client who told me this, raised her hands in a pyramid format. She said, you have this nice combination of three things. One is empathy, and that's the connection with humans, as I mentioned. The other is courage, because then I'll talk about my philosophy in a moment. Courage is a really important part of it. And the third part is tech savviness. I love technology. I'm a real geek. I can geek out at stuff, and that's not very typical for people persons. That's something a lot of coaches kind of shy away from. It says either you have a personal connection or you have used technology, and I really see how, and I always have used both in the work that I do. Happy to say more about the courage now or at another point, up to you.
Beautifully articulated, Ms. Margo. You live in 6 countries on 3 continents, raise a family of 6 in Zurich, and work across cultures your entire career. When you sit across from leaders struggling to connect with their team, how much of what you offer comes from technique, and how much comes from having been the outsider, the foreigner, or the one who had to learn how to belong?
Well, that's a great question, because I definitely do. I'm the kind of permanent foreigner. Although I feel at home no matter which country I'm in, I also always feel like a foreigner, including in my home country of the United States. That being said, there are a lot of advantages, as you're alluding to, right? Because as the outsider, you have more permission to notice things that maybe are unusual, or bring up a point that feels like, wait a minute, why are we doing things this way? Whereas when you're embedded in a system, it's much harder to be the one that speaks out and say, actually, this doesn't feel quite right. I can always blame it on the fact that I may be from another culture, another country. Even being an external coach allows me to do that in organizations. I could say, from my external perspective, I'm starting to notice this pattern, and it could be easier for me to, first of all, see that, and second of all, have the courage to speak up about it, than for somebody who's really embedded in that system. So it's definitely an advantage.
Indeed, Ms. Margo, you dedicated yourself to improving 1 million lives after 2,000 plus conversations. How many do you feel you've actually reached? And how do you measure a life improve when the numbers don't capture the moments that matter?
Yeah, that's a great question. We have the assumption that the people that we work with impact a lot of human beings around them, especially when we're working with leaders of organizations that have sometimes hundreds or thousands of people below them. That being said, we also work with individuals and leaders of smaller teams. So we kind of took it as a rule of thumb, about 10 people reporting to an average coachee. If I myself have worked with about 2,500, and the coaches that I work with as well have worked with also thousands, we like to think, and obviously it's very hard to measure, but it's more of an aspirational dream. But we like to think that we're somehow halfway there, that we're really making progress every day. And obviously it's not as much about the numbers as about the impact. But the million lives, the reason why we chose to share that is because we know that the quality of a person's life is so influenced by the quality of their boss. When we have a great boss, we can excel in our work. We have a lot of energy going to work. We feel good. We can have a sense of pride. When we have a quote unquote bad boss, life can really, really be tough, and the quality of life can go down dramatically. So that's where we say, hey, if we can help these people become better leaders, these bosses become better leaders, then that's going to help all the people that are around them. Not only will it help them, it's going to help the people that they lead, and hence it's going to impact their lives. I actually had a dream growing up, living in the Middle East. Part of the time that I was a teenager, I gained a big place in my heart for the Middle East, and especially the Arab community where I lived. And I had a dream to help Arabs and Israelis speak and collaborate and learn to, I hope to help contribute, bring peace to the Middle East, which obviously is still such a hot topic and one that really breaks my heart when I see the current state of affairs. And although that is not exactly the path that I ended up taking directly, it is a dream of mine to work with people in the Middle East. But I do feel like I'm already impacting lives in a positive way by helping leaders learn how to listen to the people that work for them, to help peers learn how to listen to one another, to resolve conflicts in a way that builds the relationship rather than breaking it. It's kind of my contribution to world peace, one little conversation, one team at a time, even if it's not directly working with the hottest points of conflict around the world. We hope that we're impacting lives in a positive way.
Well, we salute you for doing that, Ms. Margo. Out of the thousands of conversations across 60 plus nations, what's the one struggle that transcends every border, every industry, every level of leadership? The thing that senior executive in Zurich wrestle with just as much as the first time managers in Ohio.
Great. I think it's all about courage. Going back to that point, I really have a personal philosophy that all kind of quote unquote bad or dysfunctional behavior has some sort of fear or insecurity at its core. I don't believe people do bad things because they're bad people. I believe people do bad things because they don't know what to do otherwise. They're desperately clinging on to whether it be power or perception or reputation or results. That's what leads to the kind of destructive behavior that we sometimes see in organizations and politics, obviously. So the thing that transcends all of those organizations, people around the world and every level is managing one's own fears and one's own ability to have the emotional courage, to have the tough conversation, to be open to feedback, to seek out feedback, to be willing to be wrong and to learn and to try something new and to be open even when you've been doing your job for 20 years and you're the expert in your field, to still be willing to say, oh man, I'm lost, right? That is something that I've never met anyone that doesn't find that at least a little bit uncomfortable. And the real masters that I work with are the ones that say, I really, just like everyone else, have a lot to learn. And I'm going to go and have those conversations, even if it's uncomfortable.
Ms. Margo, you talk about emotional courage, the courage to make decisions despite doubt, to tell you the truth, to give real feedback. In your experience, what's actually harder for leaders receiving hard feedback or delivering it, and what you have learned about why both feel so impossible?
That's a great question. Which is harder, delivering or delivering or receiving hard feedback? I think a lot of people, it's really up to the person. People struggle with both. Um, some people find it easier to give the hard feedback. Other people find it easier to take the hard feedback, but they're both so tricky for different reasons, right? So the person that finds it difficult to deliver the hard feedback is the kind of person that might be more along, like what I said before, the people person that's more worried about other people's feelings, more sensitive to other people's emotional experience, and might be worried that that person will be hurt by the feedback, or maybe that they damage the relationship. That can be really hard for that person to deliver tough feedback. The person that has a hard time receiving feedback is often the one that identifies with being the expert, to being the, usually those are the same people that believe that the boss should have all the answers. And, that's actually a very cultural thing. There are interesting cultural surveys about, do you believe your boss should have all the answers? And the answer to that question is very different depending on the nationality and cultural background of the person answering. But no matter what your cultural background is, if you're that kind of person that believes the boss should have all the answers and that's your job, it's going to be very hard for you to take tough feedback potentially, because if the feedback says you need to change something, it means that you're doing something wrong, which means you weren't the expert and you maybe didn't have all the answers. So it's something about looking at your mindset, looking at your beliefs of what does it mean to be a leader, what's your role as a leader, Yeah, and that can be challenging on both ends for different reasons.
Well done, Ms. Margot. You're passionate about developing women leaders and addressing the fact that only 29% of our senior manager positions are held by women. After hundreds of conversations with women climbing that ladder, what do you tell to private that they never say in performance review? And what does the world lose when those words stay unspoken?
Hmm. Did I understand you right? You said, what did they say in private that they wouldn't say in an interview?
Yes,
Oh,
please.
that's an interesting question. I mean, I think, something that I do hear is like, I want to have and by the way, that's not just women, that's also men. But I hear it more from women where they say, I would love to have a more senior leadership role. I have ideas for the organization. I want to have a greater impact, etc. However, I've seen my boss's life and their lifestyle and their low work life balance, and I'm not going to sign up for that. That's just not for me. It's not, no, thank you. Um, so it feels to them like a bit of a conundrum. They want to have more responsibility, more opportunity, but they don't want to dedicate their whole life to work and therefore have to sacrifice their private life or their personal life. However, I think that especially nowadays, as the world is changing so fast, we all have the opportunity to rewrite what does it mean to be a senior leader? How do you run an organization? And this working around the clock thing, I think, is becoming more and more a thing of the past. Hopefully, right now we're in this transition phase between with the advent of AI and the advent of really being able to use it in an agentic way. It's not there yet. So people are still working crazy hours. Jobs are getting cut and not replaced. So people are my clients. I remember hearing this, 20 years ago, somebody would lose a job in their organization. They would have to take on maybe 50% of the responsibility, and somebody else would take 50. And then they had to take it all on. And then they were doing the job of 3 people. And then they're doing the job of 5 people. And we're still in that kind of stressful ramp up where people are being asked to do so much more than they used to, but we're not yet to the place where everyone can utilize AI to relieve them of a lot of the tasks and the time consuming activities that they have to do. But if we can get past that, if people can kind of survive this kind of dark night through the woods, when we get out into the clearing again and really harness the capabilities that AI can bring us, hopefully, I think that people will be able to hold a lot of responsibility without sacrificing their personal life so much. Even now, I think more is possible than people assume when they learn how to delegate and empower and coach their people. And also when they, again, going back to courage, have the courage to have their own leadership style that might look very different than their predecessor. So just because your boss didn't have a life holding that role doesn't mean that you have to play it that way. You can test the boundaries and you can test what's possible in a role, how to say no, etc. But you need courage. Again, you need courage.
Indeed, courage. People, let's empower women all over the world. You coach leaders through motivation, conflict management, influencing, active listening, and dealing with ambiguity. Which of these skills is most often misunderstood and the one leaders think they have but always don't? And how do you help them to see the gap?
Oh, you ask great questions, Daniel.
Thank you.
Yeah, I would say that influencing is the one that gets most, I wouldn't say misunderstood, but I think people have a lot of assumptions about what does it take to have more influence and be more successful as in influencing people. When we're training influencing, and by the way, already a lot of people think about like YouTube influencers. That's not what we're talking about. When we talk about influencing, it's like getting people on board, winning hearts and minds for new job role or a decision or a new approach. So influencing is the art of getting somebody to agree while preserving the relationship. So it's not just pushing them into something. It's not just convincing them intellectually that it's a good idea. It's also about getting their buy-in and getting them excited about doing whatever it is that you say you want to do. So the misunderstanding, though, is actually something further. It's that oftentimes people come to me for influencing training and they say, okay, I need to get better at influencing. I want to be more eloquent. I want to have better arguments. Can you help me really have good speech to influence people? And actually, I really turn it on its head and I say, the most important thing to learn if you want to get better at influencing is not talking, it's listening. You know, they give us 2 ears and 1 mouth for a reason. We should use them proportionally. I'm sure you've heard that expression before. And it's really true with influencing, especially because who knows best what is it going to take to influence that other person? Clearly the person across from you, not you, right? But we rarely take the time to ask, listen, find out what their concerns are. So I developed a model of influencing that's very simple called clear, curious, and open. And the idea is that you start with clarity for yourself about what you want the other person to do. So it's really like before you even start the conversation, sitting, maybe even writing it down, boiling it down to 1 sentence. What is it that I want this person to do? And this is also more effective on a one-on-one basis, just to say, nevertheless, it's good to have this clarity for yourself. What is it that I want this person to do? And then check your conscience. Do you have a clear conscience? Do you feel comfortable asking this person to do what you're asking them to do? Or do you feel maybe a little guilty, or like, you know, they're busy and you feel a little bit bad, or maybe you feel like it's, you know, a little gray area ethically? Any sort of, you know, fogginess in your conscience is going to translate into fogginess in your message. So knowing what you want to ask and being comfortable at, like, clear conscience asking about it is an essential basis. And then once you get into the conversation, you know, putting it out on the table soon and briefly, because what I see most people, the trap that I see them falling into is they want to influence somebody. So they just start talking. Here's what I need you to do. And here's why. And here's all the background. Here's the context. And here's this. And here's that. They talk. What do you think? And then the person just says, nope, sorry, I can't. They choose whatever little piece of information they took from what you're saying, and they have a reason to say no. Flip it on its head and you say, I need you to do this. What do you think? Then it's the other person's chance to tell you all about why, yes, no, maybe so. And then you can take from that, get curious, say, okay, so if that's what you're thinking, what would it take for you to say yes? What's your biggest concern? What would you need to prioritize this? What do you think is going to happen? So those kind of curious questions give you the information you need to influence them, to get them to agree. And then the last piece mustn't be forgotten, open, and that means open mind. Because in the course of that conversation, there may be new information that comes to light that genuinely, if you took it, you might actually change your mind too. So having that real willingness to stay open in the course of that conversation is like an attitude that you bring in that I believe is contagious. I think that if we come in with an open mind, like clear, remember, we're super clear, we're confident, but we're also open. And that allows for the person to also be open. If they feel like you're super rigid, they often respond in a rigid way. So that's one that usually surprises people a lot. They think influencing is all about a smooth talker, but it's much more about being able to listen and ask questions.
Empowering answer, Ms. Margo. You've watched leaders rise, tumble, transform, and sometimes fall. What is the most common reason talented leaders fail? Not the obvious reasons, but the quiet ones they never put on a termination report.
That's a good question. So by now you won't be surprised to hear me say that I think it's when they allow their fears to drive their behavior. So, you know, when things get critical, when the stakes are high, that's exactly when our inner critic can speak up most, and our saboteur can speak up most and say, watch out, you better do this perfectly, or you better be quick, or you better not piss that guy off, or you better, you know. This is typically the time when we can accidentally sabotage ourselves. And most of us don't even realize, you know, we all have this inner critic voice, but many of us have never realized it. We're just so accustomed to hearing it. It's just part of our brain. And the work that we do in coaching is to learn to recognize that and be like, oh, wait a second. That's my saboteur voice. That's my inner critic. Thank you, inner critic, but no thanks. I'm going to set you aside for now, and I'm going to follow my values, taking the time to think about what's important to you, what makes you feel like you have integrity as you proceed, even if doing that right thing is going to, anger some other people, having the courage to do it anyway. However, many of us, it's so hard. We're so used to this inner critic voice. We're so used to reacting to fear and doing something to avoid the outcome we don't want, rather than taking the courage to go for the thing we do want. It's like the difference between playing to win and playing not to lose. When we're playing not to lose, we're acting on the fear. We're trying to prevent the problem. And then we get caught in what I call a fear cycle. And that's something that we work on in our one-on-ones a lot is, and I love it when I can see myself getting caught in a fear cycle because I'm not immune to this, right? It's so valuable because then you have an opportunity to shift. So the fear cycle is, I'm afraid of something. So for example, I'm afraid that my boss is going to think I'm unreliable or that I'm not good enough. Let's just put it simply like that. I'm afraid that my boss is going to fire me or something. So I'm going to, do everything I can to make sure that my boss is super happy, and I'm going to work crazy hours. And then what happens is I get tired. I'm overly focused on my boss. I forget my stakeholders. I don't have the energy to have good thoughts and good ideas. So I start to show up to work more tired. I don't have fresh ideas. My performance goes down. And then suddenly I've just created the situation that I was most afraid of in the first place, where I'm not really adding that much value and my boss isn't that happy. And we can all get caught in the cycle. It's so common. And the key is to have that emotional awareness to be like, wait a minute, I just noticed that I'm doing this because I'm afraid. It's not because I have courage. So what can I do to get out of that loop is to stop and say, hang on a second. What are my values? For example, quality or teamwork. So, okay, maybe I'm going to lean on my value of teamwork instead of just trying to please my boss. Let me reach out my colleagues to work on this project together. Then suddenly you have 2 people working on this instead of 1. So you don't have to work so many hours. And maybe you get some fresh ideas from them. So now you're coming up with fresh ideas and you just get into a much more creative cycle. But it took that self-awareness and emotional awareness to realize that we're even getting caught in that loop. And I think that's where people fall down in their jobs, make those mistakes, and would never, put that on the exit interview, the self-sabotage stuff.
Very well said, Miss Margo. Your book, The Four Channels of Confidence, introduces attitude, voice, and body as a pathways of self-assurance. After thousands of coaching conversations, which of these are 4 channels do you find leader neglect most, and what does that neglect cost them?
Great question again. So we have the 4 channels: attitude, body, breath, and voice.
Mm-hmm.
Breath, gosh, they all get neglected, but breath is the one that helps all the other ones. So I would recommend starting with that one if you're looking to build your confidence. Thank you. Yeah, there's the book. If you're looking to build your confidence, that's a starting point, because what happens? So the attitude channel is all about managing that inner critic that I was talking about before. And there are many, many methods to manage it. But the first thing you need to do is be aware of it, right? And when you become aware of it, it doesn't mean that it suddenly doesn't have power over you. You need to be able to get your brain calm again. So if your saboteur is telling you there's a threat, there's a problem, chances are you're could be in this what they call sympathetic nervous system mode, where it's kind of fight or flight, and you don't really have access to your whole brain to be fully as creative as you can be. So taking a few deep breaths and pausing allows your system to calm down and get back access to those good ideas, to your eloquence, to your words. So the breath helps tame the attitude, but also being aware of that's part of the body channel, is like recognizing, oh man, I'm tense. I'm holding a lot of tension in my shoulders, or my stomach is hurting, or I just don't feel good. Or maybe I'm in what they call a low power pose. I'm making myself small. recognizing that body channel and shifting it. So your body communicates with your brain and your brain communicates with your body. So your brain tells your body, okay, you need to take steps so your arms and legs move. But your body also communicates to your brain. So if I take up space, I'm telling my brain I'm safe. There's nobody, here to attack me. If I make myself small, I'm telling my brain there's danger, watch out. And although we don't necessarily think that we are crouching and hiding, even the act of sitting in a waiting room with your legs crossed and looking at your cell phone is already putting your body in that position that accidentally communicates to your brain, watch out, threat. There's a lot of work which I also quote from Amy Cuddy and her colleagues at Harvard about these low power and high power poses. So being aware of body, making sure you're taking deep breaths, and all of that supports your voice too. Taking responsibility for being heard, using variety of tone and pitch. You have a wonderful speaking voice, Dan. You have a very unusual way of speaking, which grabs people's attention right away. That's a way of using voice to not only bring confidence to yourself, but also, project it to the outside.
Very well said, Mr. Margo, and thank you for sharing that to the world. That you wrote the first edition of your book nearly a decade ago, and you're now releasing the second edition. What have 10 more years of coaching taught you more about confidence that you did not understand when you first put pen to page?
I don't know if it was more years of confidence or more years of life more. I would say more the latter. When I first wrote the book, I was single, footloose, fancy free. And in my second edition, I had my full family. I had my son, my three bonus kids came into my life. And it just gave me a whole different perspective. I wrote this book and I find this topic interesting because it's something that I've struggled with. And I had learned so many things about building my own confidence, about going about things even when I don't feel confident doing them anyway, that I put in the book that are still valid. Then I had my son and I experienced a whole new challenge to my own confidence. Being a mom, being a working mom creates all sorts of new reasons to doubt yourself that I could never even imagine when I first wrote the book. So I brought that in. I also brought in some elements of friendship and how friendship can impact our confidence in either direction, and how to actually support our friends' confidence that also helps support our own confidence. So it was actually more life experience than work experience that provoked me to write that second edition.
Well, congratulations, Miss Margo. I hope you will add more books. Okay, because
I have many more in here.
yeah, the world's needed. So to wrap up our discussion for today, you're still counting, still adding to that 2000 plus, still working toward that million lives improve. When you finally stop, wherever that day comes, what do you hope the leaders you've taught will say about you? Not about your technique, not about your frameworks, but about who you were in the room with them when they needed someone to believe they could grow.
I would say that I hope that they feel my care. They feel how much I care about them and how much I care about humanity as a whole, and how I believe that every single conversation is leading toward us arriving at a better place as a humanity as a whole.
Very well said, Ms. Margo, and thank you for your legacy to the world. And I'm inviting you to please do come over to my other podcast, Book 101 Review. Let's talk about your book. And of course, Entrepreneurship 101. Let's talk about entrepreneurship mindset. So, Ms. Margo, can you please invite our listeners to support your book, your business, or anything you want to promote on apps, I guess?
Oh, thank you very much. Yeah, the book is available on Amazon. You type the 4 channels of confidence. My website is coachingwithoutborders.com. You can reach out. We have contact forms. We also have an information request form where you can already add a few words about the challenges that you're facing, and we'll reach out to you.
Yes, people, let's support Miss Margo, because if you support her, for sure, more and more empowering books to come, more and more empowering coaching. Miss Margo, thank you so much for your time.
Thank you.
Marty people, see you soon.